Hey there, welcome to the CMMC Compliance Guide podcast. I'm Stacey.
And I'm Brooke.
From Justice IT Consulting, where we help businesses like yours navigate CMMC and NIST 800-171 compliance. We're hard guns getting companies fast-tracked to compliance, but today we're here to give you all the secrets for free, so if you want to tackle it yourself, you're equipped to do so. Let's dive into today's episode and keep your business on track. Today, we're talking about several new clarifications that recently came out in the Department of Defense's updated CMMC Frequently Asked Questions document. We're talking about things like joint ventures, whether paper-only CUI requires an assessment, what actually counts as a significant change after certification, and how MSPs and MSSPs fit into assessment scope. So let's dive right into it. Okay, Brooke, let's start with joint ventures because we see more and more contractors teaming up to pursue opportunities. A lot of people assume that if both companies already have a CMMC status, then the joint venture automatically inherits that status. Is that really how it works?
Well, not necessarily. There's a lot about inheritance in CMMC, what controls you inherit and all that kind of fun stuff. But joint venture, if a joint venture buys out a company, that's a acquisition, right, or a merger, however you want to phrase it, whatever it might be. But if a joint venture buys out a company, if nothing changes with that company, then that's fine. Right. If something changes with how that company does business or how their scope works, then you do have to change your. Hopefully, you hadn't already got an assessment by then, but or certification by then. But if something with your network changes, it will change your whether you're still certified or not. Right. Whether that certification is still valid, but that joint venture absolutely does not inherit the certification status of the company that they bought, right, or merged with or acquired. Well, if it's a joint venture, I guess they're buying it anyway or investing in it or whatever. But so it wholly depends on how you're doing business and what you intend to do. How that contract comes down to that company that's doing the work, right? So there's a ton of different ways, I guess, to look at it. But, if a joint venture or a PE company or something came in and bought a company out and is going to change the structure of that company and how it works, then you very well might have something to worry about. But they won't inherit the controls or they won't inherit the certification at all. So
another clarification that caught a lot of people's attention involved hard copy CUI. We've talked to companies that keep everything on paper and assume CMMC doesn't really apply to them. What does that new guidance say about that?
Well, this is interesting. Because we talked about, with our clients about, how do we handle our subs and what do we do? Well, it flows down and, talking to, it's bad for the manufacturers, but for the construction folks, it's even worse, They say, well, what about, I know so-and-so over here, they're not CMMC certified and they're not even going to bother going to get it, and all that kind of fun stuff. And I won't tell you some of the other things they said, but, they're very worried about that. So a little while back, the Army came out and said, hey, you know what? If all you do is give paper CUI to a sub, right? And they don't put it in any of their electronic systems. They just use that paper. They don't copy it. They don't scan it. They don't retype it or anything like that.
It's not digitized.
Right, it's not digitized. They don't go, draw it themselves into their systems. Then that paper CUI just has to be controlled like a paper CUI by DOD instruction 5200.48. So there are controls around it, but that company does not have to have a level 2 certification. They don't have to be assessed to CMMC standards, right? And so that was a godsend for a bunch of, especially contractors that are contracting out to all these small companies that there's no way that they're going to spend, $100,000 just on certification, right? So if you have paper CUI, it doesn't go into any electronic systems, doesn't get transcribed or put in any way in any electronic systems, then yes, that does not require the same level of protection. It does not require CMMC Level 2 certification or assessment.
So one of the big questions that we hear often is that after a company achieves their compliance, what happens next? So what specifically qualifies as a significant change that could require reassessment?
So you want to stay away from the significant change. So they've come out, and I'm sure they'll come out again and try to explain what significant means. But they did specifically call out mergers and acquisitions, right? That likely would, if there was a merger of companies. Again, this is also going to depend on how they do business. If they merge, but the companies still do business as how they used to with the separate systems and all that, then likely because I don't know every particular instance, but likely it wouldn't require a reassessment. But when you start wanting to gain the efficiency of having one company rather than two, having one IT department, having one directory, having one, all that kind of fun stuff, that changes the scope. So that will absolutely 100% require reassessment. And so you want to stay away from those kinds of changes. You want to pay attention to when your certification date is coming up again. Hey, it's a year out, so let's start planning this and let's get ready to cut over. And then, you could have to figure out how that works exactly. But, at that point, you'd want to wait until that point to do something. Otherwise, you will have to go through that reassessment, and it will be a complete reassessment. And if the systems are merged and all that, you may feel comfortable going through just straight to the certification assessment. But early in the game like this, I would still think about doing a mock, even though you may have done 2 mocks and 2 certifications already. If you merge systems, it really depends on a number of factors. But really, if you do that, consider going ahead and doing another mock again, right? So, but yeah, it's those kinds of changes that change the scope. Or change how the company will receive contracts. Those, cage code, stuff like that, highest level owner, all that kind of fun stuff. That very well may cause a reassessment, cause an invalidation of your current certification, I should say, which will require a new assessment.
I can imagine that you probably want to move strategically with that because
Absolutely.
Not only is it the reassessment, but it's the reassessment cost added there. So it's not cheap.
Right. That's not cheap. And, all the work to get there is not cheap, and so, it's a process that you need to plan very well for and think about all the risk involved.
All right, let's jump into managed service providers because this is another area where there are a lot of assumptions. So, if an MSP provides infrastructure or support for an environment that contains CUI, does that MSP automatically need its own CMMC certification?
Not at all. So the MSP does not need their own certification. It will make things easier for the assessor and for the OSC and for the MSP. OSC is going to be the organization seeking certification, which is the contractor that has the contract that hired the MSP, basically, right? But it doesn't require the MSP to have a certification, although it is helpful. What it will require of the MSP is that they're part of that assessment. And so what I can tell you is being part of that assessment is no small task. It's a lot of prep. It's a lot of sitting down and going through it. You've got to have somebody knowledgeable about CMMC and about your systems, about the policies involved, the responsibility matrices involved, and all that kind of fun stuff. You've got to have somebody or somebody's familiar with all that to sit through the assessment. So I'm sure they might be. We set through the whole assessment with our clients. That's just what we do, and we devote a lot of time to it. We devote a lot of time, of course, to prep. But I'm sure that they could probably Set it to where the MSP doesn't necessarily have to be there every day, but or maybe not all day every day. But there are quite a few. We say there's tons and tons of documentation, which is true. There's not many of the controls that you can just do technically and not have, documentation to back it. Well, you really have to have documentation for everything, but there's not a lot that are just the company themselves with no MSP at all. So the MSP, depending on what the MSP does, of course, we have a tendency to be, a completely outsourced IT department for our clients. So we do a lot for them. So I don't see how we could not be on the call every day with with the assessors in the company. So, there's a lot of time commitment. There's all sorts of documentation and proof and everything else that the MSP will have to have ready and show during the assessment. So it's a tall ask, and if you have more than one, if you're an MSP and you have more than one client, then you might look at getting a certification. Is it expensive? Yes, it is. Will it help you and your clients with this? Will it help you with anything else down the road? So those are the questions you have to ask yourself if you're an MSP. But short answer is no, you don't have to have a certification if you're an MSP, but you do have to have your ducks in a row. You have to have all your documentation. You absolutely have to have your customer responsibility matrix that's a CRM. So the CRMs of all your security products that you use to secure their environment.
Here's another situation we see pretty often. Let's say an MSP provides IT support and an MSSP manages security tools, but neither vendors ever directly receive CUI. Many companies assume that means these providers are out of scope. Would that be true?
Well, they may be out of scope for the CUI, but you got to understand the different categories of data. One is CUI, of course, controlled unclassified information. The other one is SPD or SPA. SPD is the data, so security protection data. If something processes security protection data or holds it, then it's a security protection asset, right? So if you hold or process SPD, then you're an SPA. So, and that includes people, that includes MSPs, that includes whatever security tool you might have. And so when you're thinking about a security, any of your tools that help secure the environment of the CUI are going to be in scope as far as being in the assessment scope. They may not be in scope for CUI, but they're in the assessment scope. You will be assessed on those security controls. If you provide a SIM that's a cloud-hosted SIM, SIM is a security information and event monitor. So if you provide that, that'll be in scope. You'll have to have a CRM for it. It'll have to say what you do and what the SIM vendor does. And then you'll have to make sure that the SSP says, what exactly you do and what the client's responsible for. Well, we generally write that in the SSP, but in your CRM, that would be what is in your CRM in detail, actually. So, but nevertheless, even if you never see CUI, you're still in the assessment scope for security protection. Any security that protects CUI in any manner is going to be in scope. Your RMM, your remote monitoring and management tool, is going to be in scope. It'll be in scope at least for SPD because it provides updates. You can run scripts with it, monitor the machine, get alerts from it, all that kind of fun stuff. Those are all security actions. You can't say they're not, but you have to also make sure it's configured to where you don't have a chance of seeing CUI when you hop on somebody's machine, right? Mm-hmm. So there are ways to scope that out of CUI, but you have to know how to do that. And you also have to be able to get the CRM for that RMM tool. In any case, you are still in the assessment scope. For the question, you're still in the assessment scope with SPD as an MSP. Is that enough TLAs for you? That would be TLA would be a 3-letter acronym. So there's a bunch of those.
Yeah, there's plenty in CMMC.
Yeah, plenty. CMC, the military, MSP, the IT world. Yeah.
All right, we're going to wrap up with this final question that creates a lot of confusion. If my MSP manages my cloud environment, does that automatically make them a cloud service provider?
It does not. Now, there's 5 basic rules that you can look at that the DoD laid out that shows why you would or would not be a cloud service provider. But most MSPs are not going to be considered a cloud service provider. You have to have a something that the end user can provision easily and quickly by themselves, right? Something that doesn't require the MSP's intervention. We don't really have any of that on our side. I'm sure there may be some MSPs that have automated some of those things. But there's also a difference between just plain automation and being a cloud service provider. So there are like 5 bullets that you have to worry about, 5 things you have to worry about. But most of the time, an MSP is not going to be a cloud service provider. They will be an external service provider, which is external service provider is the whole umbrella. And then there's that's an ESP. So there's ESPs that are CSPs, which is a cloud service provider. So ESP that is a CSP, or ESPs that are not a CSP. That's how they define that. So they're all ESPs. But if you're a CSP, then you're your own category, right? If you're not a CSP, then you're just one of the rest. And so that could be your SIM tool if it's cloud hosted. That could be the MSP. That could be your RMM tool. That could be a whole lot of things. So the short answer to your question is no, that does not automatically make an MSP a cloud service provider, a CSP.
Before we wrap up today's episode, we actually have a listener question from FedCon. So Austin was in beautiful Washington, D.C. over the week, and he actually met one of our listeners. We didn't get their name, unfortunately, but thank you so much for submitting a question. It's always wonderful when we get to hear from you guys in person. It's pretty awesome that we get to put a face to the name most of the time. So, but without further ado, the question is, if I give a subcontractor access to my systems for CUI, do I need to do all the training, awareness, and screening for them too?
Yes. And it also depends on what that contractor is doing for you and what they have access to. But yes, they'll need to do the same thing that your employees do, is take the training. So if they're for us, if we hire a contractor in here to come be a technician, and help our customers, absolutely, 1,000%, they do have to take all the cybersecurity training. But now, if you hire a contractor to come in and sweep the floors, probably not,
Mm-hmm.
So, but yes, the most of the time, well, I don't know about most of the time. The way I think about a contractor, to come in and work in your business, they're going to need that training. Not necessarily all the time. Depends on what they're doing for you. But I would depend on if they're a part of your business doing the main part that brings security protection data or CUI or something adjacent there, then yes, they're going to have to do all the training and everything. And if you have them doing something significant in your enterprise anyway, or in your company anyway, then I would argue that yes, you're going to want to make sure that they're trained on cybersecurity and trained on the things they need to be trained on to be secure and safe and do their job well. So short answer is yes. Longer answer is maybe.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for answering all of those questions, Brooke.
No problem.
If you have any questions about what we covered, please reach out to us. We're here to help fast track your compliance journey. Text, email, or call in your questions and we'll answer them for free here on the podcast. You can find our contact info at cmmccomplianceguide.com. Stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, stay compliant, stay secure, and make sure to subscribe.